Hi, I'm Nicole Elwood, and earlier this week I sat down with Democratic nominee running for governor Paul Davis. Here's the latest. Well, thank you for meeting with me today. And one of my first questions would be what problems do you see Kansas facing in the next 5 to 10 years? And what would your vision be to address those problems?
Well, we've got a number of issues that we're now grappling with, and we're going to continue to grapple with over the next 5 years, 10 years, and maybe even longer. I think one of the most important is making sure that we are recommitting ourselves as a state to public education. And when I say public education, I mean early childhood clear through higher education. Over the past couple of years, there have been some pretty sharp cuts to public education, and I think a lot of Kansans are worried about the state's commitment, and they know that we've had good schools, we've had good universities, and but they're real worried about the future of that. So I think what we've got to do is really recommit ourselves to investing in the future generations of Kansans, and knowing that that is also a cornerstone of growing our economy. Strong public schools are really the very key to a stronger economy. Beyond that, the state has got some budgetary issues that we're going to be dealing with. The governor's tax plan has sent the state budget deep into the red. The Legislative Research Department is projecting that we will face a $1 billion budget deficit over the next 5 years if we continue down the path of the Brownback tax experiment, and that's why I think that we've got to change course. Another issue that's certainly very important in this part of the state is water, and this is, I think, perhaps the most significant issue that the state has over the long term, and it's a complicated issue. The Ogallala Aquifer is drying up, and if we continue to deplete the aquifer, we know what's going to happen. So we've got to take a number of steps to be able to preserve the ability for western Kansas to have water for consumption, for irrigation, and it's really vital to the future of the economy here. So that's another very important issue that we need to spend a lot of time trying to deal with.
And Colorado has seen a large influx of tax dollars that will benefit the education system. And should Kansas look into legalizing marijuana?
I am not a supporter of legalizing marijuana. I think that Colorado has gone down this road, and Washington has gone down this road, but I just don't think that this is a step that the people of Kansas are wanting to take, and it's not something that I'm supportive of.
FHSU is based on an affordable college education system. And how would you make sure that every person who wants to go to college can get one at an affordable price?
Yeah. Well, Fort Hays State is a great model of being able to deliver a very high quality education product, and doing so at an affordable rate. One of the challenges that we are seeing and we are continuing to see is that tuition is continuing to rise year after year after year. And I'm very concerned that a lot of students are being priced out of the ability to get a college education, not to mention the fact that so many students are dealing with just massive amounts of student loans when they complete their education. So one of the things that I'd like to spend some time talking with the university leaders and with students and with the Board of Regents is really a long-term plan for how we can keep tuition increases at a minimum, and we can make sure that we're really trying to support the core mission of each of our 6 state universities.
And what would be your vision on K through 12 education?
Yeah. Well, we have a school finance lawsuit that we have dealt with a portion of that case here to date, but we still have another portion, the so-called adequacy portion, that we're dealing with here. And it's unfortunate that we need a court to tell us that we need to properly fund our public schools. I am a child of 2 teachers and the parent of a soon-to-be kindergartner, so the issue of public education is a very personal one to me. We have always had great public schools in Kansas, but as I mentioned, a lot of people are really concerned about that. So I think we have to recommit the state to delivering the very best public education that we can to our children. It is, I think, the single largest factor in the great quality of life that we have in Kansas, and people are not going to want to continue to live here or relocate here if we don't have high quality public schools. So it's something that we have to spend a lot of time committing ourselves to, and we have to restore the cuts that have been made and invest in our future.
And where do taxes play a role in this?
Well, you've got to have a revenue stream in order to fund those priorities like public education. And that's one of the disagreements that I have with Governor Brownback, is that what he has done with his tax plan is he has depleted our ability to continue funding things like public education. When the tax plan plunges the state budget into a deficit of $1 billion over the next 5 years, our ability to continue funding our K through 12 schools, our state universities, all of those things are jeopardized, and it's just a direction that we cannot continue to go in.
And what are your thoughts on vouchers for people who want to send their children to private schools?
You know, I will always defend the right of people to either homeschool their children or to send their children to private school. I think parents should always have that prerogative, and they know what's best for their children. But we have a public school system that we support through taxpayer dollars, and I want to make that system the very best system that we can possibly have, and I don't support using our taxpayer dollars to subsidize private schools.
And why is that?
Well, I just think that part of the social contract that we all have as taxpayers is that we're going to deliver a public school system for any child out there who wants to attend public schools. And we need to use our precious dollars to make that system the best it can possibly be. And frankly, we don't have the resources to be redirecting those monies to private schools.
And so another question will be, what exactly is your tax plan?
Well, what we have proposed is that we need to freeze the income tax rates at where they will be on January 1 of 2015. Because if we don't do that, we will see this huge budget deficit of over $1 billion that I've talked about. What we want to do then is we want to take a top-to-bottom look at the tax code and whether the incentives that we have in the tax code that are supposed to be creating jobs are really having that effect. Because if they're not, we need to get rid of them and we need to do something different. So I want this commission to look at making sure that our tax code is accountable. And the other thing that I really want them to look at is how we can start reversing this trend of property taxes that are going up, up, and up year after year after year. I think that the tax problem that we have in this state is a property tax problem. I've been a long-time advocate for reducing property taxes, and this is one of the priorities that I want to have as governor.
The vote by mail is saying to increase property tax so teachers could get paid.
Well, one of the problems that we have when we don't fund public schools the way we should at the state level is that we are pushing more and more pressure down to local units of government, school boards, that are having to go out and use the only source of revenue that they have, the property tax, more and more to be able to fund our public schools. It's been happening that way here now for a number of years, and it's a trend that I think that we need to discontinue because people are just getting more and more fed up with seeing their property tax bills go up year after year after year. And we wouldn't have to do this if the folks in Topeka would simply properly fund our public schools.
And when you say properly fund, would that mean changing funding? Like with some schools get too much money, and then some schools don't get enough money.
Well, we have a formula for how we fund our schools, and it's rather complicated. And I won't say it's perfect by any means, but the chief problem with that formula is that it's just not being funded in the way that it needs to be funded. And what we need to be doing, I think, is putting more dollars into the base aid per pupil. That is the primary way that we fund our public schools. We dealt with another way that we fund them through equalization during this past session because of this court order. But that's where I really want to focus our energies over the next couple of years. And we'll have to see what happens, of course, with the rest of this school finance lawsuit. But if you look at base aid per pupil funding today and where it was a number of years ago, it's substantially lower. And we need to get back to where we were before the recession started.
And do you support what Michelle Obama is doing with the healthy eating with kids through K through 12, the program?
Well, we clearly have an obesity problem in this country, and we have to be very cognizant of what we are providing our children to eat at schools. And I think that we really need to have a local approach to this. There isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all answer to this, but I know a lot of local school boards and school administrators are very cognizant of this problem and have been trying to make a lot of efforts to give kids more healthier choices in terms of what's served at breakfast and lunch and what's in vending machines, and we need to continue to work on this.
And what is your plan to ensure state employees to get their pensions?
Yeah. Well, the state employee retirement system, which is not only for state employees, it also includes school district employees, teachers, includes firefighters, police, has been underfunded by the state now for a number of decades. And frankly, Democrats and Republicans are to blame for this because they've been told over and over again that the system is underfunded, and they have ignored those calls. We took a big step forward a couple of years ago in trying to shore up the KPERS system so that we're going to have the resources there to pay out the retirement claims that are going to accrue over the future. But in order to make that work, we have to be able to put the dollars in to the system year after year after year going forward. And we can't do that when we are in a $1 billion plus budget deficit position. So we've got to be much more disciplined and fiscally responsible with the state budget so that we can meet those obligations.
What are your thoughts about Obamacare?
Well, I think it's a flawed system that needs to be repaired in a number of ways. There are some good things about it, and there are some bad things about it. And it would be nice if people in Washington, D.C. would be able to get their act together and be able to work in a bipartisan manner. But the state of Kansas is not in a position where we can change a whole lot of things, and we have to deal with what we have to deal with. I disagree with the decision that the governor made to not implement a state-based health insurance exchange that we were very well prepared to do. Our Republican Insurance Commissioner, Sandy Prager, has been a real leader in that area. And we could have not subjected thousands of Kansans to having to deal with the total mess that was the federal exchange if we would have formed a state-based exchange. I think the governor just made the wrong decision there. The other component of this that states are having to deal with is the issue of Medicaid expansion. I've been spending a lot of time talking to hospital administrators, physicians, people in home health care, and uniformly they are telling me that this is something that we need. And it's going to be critical for the survival of a lot of hospitals, especially smaller hospitals in rural areas. And once again, the governor has not wanted to move forward with this. There are many Republican governors who have said, yes, this is the right thing for our state to do, and they have moved forward with it, and I agree with them.
How would you move forward? Some people are getting denied the Obamacare and Medicaid.
Well, what I think we need to do is have a Kansas-based solution for this. The Kansas Hospital Association right now is coming up with a proposal, and I'm very interested in looking at that, and I think that may be a vehicle that Republicans and Democrats can agree upon as a model for how we go forward. Fortunately, the federal government is giving states a wide degree of flexibility in designing their own programs, and so we will have some opportunities there.
What were your thoughts when you first found out that nearly 100 Republicans signed on to your campaign?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a 12-year track record of being able to successfully work with Republicans and bring Democrats and Republicans together to form bipartisan coalitions. I've done it on occasion after occasion after occasion, and that's why these folks are coming to support me, because they know that I know how to build bipartisan coalitions. Governor Brownback has not only not been able to work with Democrats very well, he hasn't been able to work with a lot of Republicans. And we need to have somebody in the governor's office who can unite Democrats and Republicans, who's an inclusive leader. And that's the kind of person that I am. And I'm very proud to have the support of over 100 current and former Republican elected officials in really an unprecedented event in Kansas political history.
And what else makes you different from Brownback right now?
Well, I think that we have a different approach to governing, different styles of governing. He spent 16 years in Washington, D.C., and I think has brought that kind of approach back to Kansas, where I have a 12-year track record of being able to bring people together, Democrats and Republicans. I think we also just have very different priorities. I want to prioritize education, and I want to be able to use proven methods to growing our economy rather than propagating some kind of a tax experiment that's really just another version of trickle-down economics, which has never worked anywhere. So I think we have just very different priorities as well.
And how would you set a legislative agenda with a legislature that is very conservative?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have been able to work with not just moderate Republicans, but also some very conservative Republicans. And we don't agree all the time, but we've been able to find common ground on a lot of issues over the years. And I feel very confident in my ability to be able to work with not only moderate Republicans but conservative Republicans and try to bring people together to achieve consensus.
What would corporate farms play in the Kansas agriculture community?
Well, family farms are still the foundation of our agricultural sector, and I think it's very important that we have an agriculture policy going forward that is going to help the family farmer out and continue to be able to allow families to pass along their farms and help the next generation of family farmers. There has been a lot of discussion about the corporate farm issue in the legislature, and nothing has been able to actually reach the governor's desk yet. And I'm willing to look at those proposals and keep an open mind about them. I think there are some positive things that are included in some of those proposals, and I think there are some things that give me some concern as well. One of the important aspects of this is that we continue to allow local units of government, county commissions, to be able to make decisions regarding land management and zoning and things like that. I don't think that that's something that the folks in Topeka ought to be taking away from local government.
And what would be your idea on how to keep small farms here and viable?
Well, there are a number of issues that a lot of farmers are dealing with right now, and one of them is just the rising burden of property taxes. As I talk to people in rural Kansas, they are just seeing these year after year after year property tax increases that are getting very, very difficult for them to absorb over time. So we've got to, I think, change the trend of these property taxes that are going up year after year. We need to continue to invest in agricultural research. We've got a great research institution at Kansas State University, and they have been able to help provide farmers with new tools, new technology to be able to make their farms more cost efficient and be able to produce better and greater products. And that's one of the things that I think that we need to continue in. And we also need to have a robust agricultural policy in the state, and it's important that the federal government do its part through the farm bills that we've seen in the past, and we hope to have in the future, that gives a lot of farmers a lot of support that they need and will continue to need in the future. The water issue, of course, is a major one as well. If we don't be able to deal with the future of water in western Kansas, the agriculture economy is threatened, and we have to address this issue, and farmers need to be right there at the table helping us resolve these issues.
And how would you bring people back to the small rural communities?
Well, I think there are some exciting opportunities here for folks to repopulate a lot of areas that have been losing population. One of the very key issues to this, though, is that we have to be able to have high-speed broadband access in rural communities, and we have too many areas in this state that just don't have that access, and you can't expect to get people to move to rural parts of the state if we don't have high-speed broadband access. Rural telephone companies are providing a lot of that access, but they are struggling with a lot of issues that the state has brought upon them, and I think we've got to do more to help support the rural telephone companies so that they can deliver broadband access in a lot of rural areas. The agriculture and the energy sector is providing new opportunities for a lot of communities. We are now being able to make energy products out of agriculture, and that can be a boon to a lot of people. The wind economy is something that Kansas has some great natural advantages where we just have not realized the potential that I think that we can realize if we really focus on policies that are going to promote the wind industry and can help a lot of rural communities. Well, this is a proposal that I did support, and you know, I'm not convinced that it is exactly a magic bullet in terms of trying to repopulate a lot of rural communities. I hope that it is helping and will continue to help in the future, but I think there are a lot of other things that I mentioned that we're going to have to do as a state in order to help incentivize people to locate in rural communities. You know, also along with that is we've got to support our rural schools, and we've got to support our rural hospitals because people are going to want to locate in places where there are good public schools, and they want to be in places where they can get access to health care.
And how would you make that happen throughout the years?
Well, we've got to you know, make sure that we're properly funding our schools in the finance formula. Rural schools don't have big tax bases that they can rely upon if they want to try to fund things locally, and they rely upon support from the state. And so when the state doesn't do that, it puts them in a more and more difficult position. Additionally, you know, back to the issue of Medicaid, you know, many rural hospitals, because of the Affordable Care Act, are receiving less dollars from Medicare. And if they don't get more Medicaid dollars, that's putting them in a tougher position to be able to keep their doors open. I've had more than a few conversations with hospital administrators in rural areas that have said, if we don't have this, I'm not sure we're going to be able to remain open. And that's a critical issue in rural communities.
And Brownback has frequently expanded gun rights within the state. Do you support that expansion, or would you like to see it go in a different direction here in Kansas?
You know, I've generally been a pretty strong supporter of Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. I'm a gun owner, and I very much respect the citizen's ability to own and carry a firearm. And you know, we always have to, you know, balance the rights of the individual with community needs. And I think one of the issues that I have had a lot of concern about is that we need to make sure that you know, when people are coming into public buildings, that they're going to be safe in those public buildings. We've spent a lot of time talking about that very issue at the state capitol. Counties and cities are talking about those issues, and I think it's good that we're having more and more conversations about how we're going to ensure that the public is safe when they come into a public building.
And do you think Brownback's gun legislation will be maintained within the federal level?
Well, we'll have to see if there. I know that there is discussion of a lawsuit, and you know, we're just going to have to see what happens with that. I supported that bill, and you know, I believe that it's a step in the right direction, and you know, we'll just have to see how it filters its way through the court system.
How will you get the younger generation who is fresh out of high school, just graduated, just turned 18, how are you going to get them to pay attention to politics?
Well, there
are
a lot of reasons, I think, for the younger generations to get involved and engaged, because a lot of the decisions that are being made at the state level directly impact people who are either attending public schools or are attending universities. For example, you just look at the higher education cuts that have occurred over the past couple of years. Because of those cuts, tuition was raised on all of the people that are attending Kansas universities. And so, I mean, there's a real reason for students to be engaged in this election and in all the elections this year.
Well, that's all the questions that I have. Thank
Okay.
you so much for meeting with me today.
Yeah, delight to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Nicole Elwood. Earlier this week, I sat down with Democratic nominee running for governor, Paul Davis. Here's the latest.